Hello, and welcome to week 8 of your Troy Online University Literature course. At this point, we are heading into the last 2 weeks of the class, and I just want to let you know that I've made the final exam open, so you can go ahead and access it. The final is not proctored. This means that you can enter it anytime you want and as many times as you want. The final really isn't so much as a test of what you know, but as a test of what you've learned. Really making sense of the literature that you yourself have engaged and found meaning in. So you will be going to under exams and quizzes, and you will select the final exam. And when you go into the final essay exam, you will see that it allows multiple attempts, so you can go in and save your work, and you can come back and add more. I'd love to see quotes, evidence, observations. They really are two questions that focus on what sense you have made of the literature and the readings in the course. So please feel free to go ahead and start that. The item is available today, and it will be available through next week, closing on the 25th of July at 11:30 p.m. Now, as far as your readings for this week and of course next week, we are in kind of the ending portion of our course. But this means, I hope this means that you're still engaging it and you're still enjoying the literature, as I definitely see in your week 7 postings. Week 8, we're going to be reading Fiction in the 50s. We'll be reading Saul Bellows' Augie March, Flannery O'Connor's Good Country People, and John Cheever's The Swimmer. All 3 short stories, and they should be engaging. In week 9, next week, we'll be reading Thomas Pynchon's Entropy, Suzanne Legrand's Schrodinger's Cat, and Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. We'll also be reading a few samples from some of the contemporary works of minimalism and postcolonialism, as in Raymond Carver's Cathedral, Reed's No Hodo Manifesto, and Jasmine Lahari's Sexy. And so these are kind of the ending portions to, of course, our course. Now, just to let you know, I think that you've done an amazing job so far with your literary readings. As I was going through week 7's postings, I was so super impressed with the way that you've really grown in your comfort and your vernacular in relation to talking about literature. And I encourage all of you to kind of go back maybe to that first week's postings and really take a look at how much you've really learned and what you yourself have brought to the literature. In fact, there were a couple points in the discussion board this last week where you mentioned, sharing these bits of readings and literature, short stories, etc., poems with your friends and your family. And so I hope that you are beginning to see that literature as a construct is not about kind of taking an abstract knowledge from it, but it really is about pulling the world that you know it through the text, and then of course vice versa. So I'm really pleased with that. Joseph, I really like that you started the week out with the themes of alienation, marginality, and the painful struggle, which you connected to the Harlem Renaissance, but it also connects in many ways to that line between modernity and postmodernity. So I like that you picked up on those strains in the readings. Christopher M., you did a great reading of Toomer's Cane, which was a difficult work, but a different work in the sense of the narrative structure, which you pointed out. Christopher B., I like that you wrote about Daddy, Sylvia Plath's work. You connected personally with the poem, and you really thought about it in terms of where you had lived, i.e. Germany, and of course your family. Sarah S., you had an excellent post. It was a great example of the engagement that you're connecting with literature, and I think all of you should take a look at Sarah's post. Sherry, you had a great reading of The Harlem Dancer, which is an interesting poem, and some of you really did enjoy it. So I'm glad to see that you're taking it and making it into meaning for yourself. Mark, excellent reading of Zora Neale Hurston's The Gilded Six Bits. I could really see that you weren't just wrestling with the summary, but that you were really thinking about what does this text say about the time period, and of course then what does it say about our time period as the reader. Kevin, you did a great focus on the odd or the uniqueness in these readings, and the post that you had was packed full of information. Megan, I absolutely loved how you interpreted the Gilded Six Bits, and you also had an excellent reading of Allen Ginsberg's Hell, which is a really unique and somewhat disturbing piece in some ways. Ginsberg was not what you would call a no one puts his poetic meanderings on pillows. He has a sense of the absurd and also the grotesque. So you had a great reading of it. Ryan, excellent posting. I think just like Sarah's, that it's something that everyone in the class should probably take a look at, because I do think it's a helpful way to look at the literature. Philip, great point on Negro Speaks of River, on the idea that humanity is connected throughout the text, and this notion of the river meandering through the human struggle and the human success, and that was really good. Ansley, nice reading of the poetry. I really liked how you pulled out Howe and the supermarkets of California, this notion that Ginsberg was really ranting against capitalism and conformity. John, great reading of the works. You did a good reading of Lowell, and Lowell wasn't mentioned a lot, and I think it's kind of sad because Robert Lowell's poetry really does have a depth that is often mispronounced or people are misinformed about it. They're kind of a very surface read, but you really did pull in to the Union Dead, which, as I followed the strain of you and your discussion with your peers, created a lively discussion about war and about history, and I do appreciate you for giving that platform. Edmund, a good pull-in of Dos Passos USA, this notion of the use of headlines, which many of you connected with as you were reading that piece. Charles, great summary of Bishop's The Fish, and it is, as most of you mentioned in your postings, one of your favorites, and that you really could empathize in an odd way with not the fisher man or woman, but really with the fish itself. Jonathan, great connection between Robert Lowell and Robert Frost. They are very much in that Northeastern tradition of very naturalist writers in a modern context, so good connection there. Jessica, I really loved your focus on the emotional pull of the Harlan Renaissance, that you really could feel both sympathy and empathy to these readers and these writers. Jordan, excellent reading of Jane Toomer's Cain and The Negro Speaks of Rivers by Hughes. I really did enjoy your interpretation. Roderick, pulling in Ginsberg's Howe, this notion that he was really ranting about both hypocrisy and injustice, and that really is a strain of the beat poets too, this sense of ennui when faced with the reality of this kind of semi-permanent world. Jason, great reading of the poem Bishop's The Fish. Forrest, nice engagement with USA by Dos Passos. I like how you really pulled out how the different narrative techniques affected you as the reader. Russell, I really liked your interpretation of Ginsberg's poetry in conjunction with the figure of Walt Whitman. You had an excellent engagement with the poem and also a good summary of the work too. Jeremy, nice connection between our time as far as flipping through the channels in our TV-centric and media-centric world, and Dos Passos' use of headlines or that journalistic perspective in his writing. Lindsay, I was so glad to see the connection between history and Dos Passos that you pulled out, and also you had a great reading of Bishop's poetry. Camellia, I like that you focus on Langston Hughes and the way that he portrays in artistic and aesthetic form the African American plight and struggle. Melvin, great summaries of the work. You're pulling some great connections in those concepts. Emily, I love that you, like others, really looked at the fish in the sense of not how you empathized with the person who caught the fish, but with the fish itself. Greg, thanks for mentioning the notions of confusion that you felt when entering Jane Toomer's Cain. In fact, I had to teach the work when I was in graduate school to teachers, and I just remember the first time I read it thinking, how in the heck am I going to engage this? And I really find it to be a work of such great value because of its confusions, because of its unwillingness to follow or adhere to those dictates that we like to put on a text. And that's a great spot to talk about the tensions in our expectation as a reader and the expectations that we place on a text. Jennifer, nice focus on what you enjoy. I really like that you focus on this idea that this poetry is odd. There's a offness to it, to use kind of a colloquial phrase. Carrie, nice focus on the notion of exile and travel and Bishop. I like that you pointed that out. I think it's important. Many of her more famous poetry movements and ideas really do situate on how she's an observer in this observed world. The Waiting Room is a great poem for that. I would highly recommend that poem. Quenisha, excellent post. I like that you focused on Skunk Hour as being capturing a moment of crisis. And it's so placid and calm, but there is something simmering beneath the surface, and it was good of you to point that out. Ashlyn, I like that you took some readings from a prior text, which was W.E.B. Du Bois' notion of two-ness, or the doubling, and you applied it to your readings. And I think that that is exactly what we should be doing at this point, is thinking about how have we built on our awareness from Bierce's Chickamauga to Skunk Hour, or For the Union Dead. You know, that notion of building is always going to be key. Jason, nice reading of Zora Neale Hurston. I like that you kind of got this kind of connection because of your proximity to Eatonville. And I do strongly encourage you, if you've not been, to go ahead and go. It's a great way to kind of see the world that she may have viewed before writing both The Gilded Six-Bits and, of course, the more famous novels like Mules and Men and Their Eyes Are Watching God. And one great reading of Daddy. It is a more pessimistic poem, but there's a sense of redemption, I guess, but it is a problematic work too. As I mentioned, I think that most of you are doing really well at engaging the literature and really thinking about it. I am also really excited to see your final exams. I think your midterms were very good for the most part. There were a couple places where I saw some tension, but I think you'll find that the final will allow you to be much more conversant. Remember, an essay like the one you're writing should be anywhere from 5 to 8 paragraphs. So you really do want this to be robust. This should probably be something that should be completed over a series of days, not just a performance of one time. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thanks, and have a great day.